On this week's episode, I-501C, the podcast for nonprofit board members, we've got a guest who's up north, out west, and just had an opportunity to meet her, Sharmon Lebby. Sharmon Lebby is the founder of Blessed Designs Consulting, and today we're going to talk about starting a nonprofit and what you need to look for in your first set of board members. But before we do that, Sharmon, if you please, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you came to found Blessed Designs Consulting.
Yeah, so I started this fun little venture about 4 years ago after having started a nonprofit myself. Struggled through that, burned out, and yet really wanted to help other people learn how to do this better. And so we put together a system, and we learned from everything that we did before, and we learned from everything that other people had done, what we had done right, what they had done wrong, and really got it together so that we could just make building nonprofits easier and smoother and help people not, be Googling at 3 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out what in the world should we be doing.
Which sounds like maybe what you did as you were trying to build this,
That
right?
spent
Your
many a
first,
nights on Google, many a nights on Google.
it's funny. We see so many people want to start nonprofits, and bless them for doing that. But it is not easy. It really is hard. You need to be intentional and kind of know what you're doing a little bit, because it's just like starting a business, isn't it?
Yes, it is exactly like starting a business. And I think people forget that. Everybody tends to be very service-minded, service-based, but there is an entire compliance and business element to it that everybody either doesn't know about or completely forgets about. And just like it'll come together.
And one of the things that nonprofits have to worry about, that starting a for-profit business you don't have to worry about, is that first board of directors or a board of directors, because for-profits don't need to have a board of directors. So let's talk a little bit about that. That's one of your areas of expertise. How does a founder, how should they look at the board, and how do you get the right first board members?
So one, I like to disabuse anybody of the idea that we're going to get it perfect the first time
Yeah.
around. It's not going to happen. We're dealing with people, and people aren't perfect, and so I want you to just throw that out the window to begin with. But I do think there are elements that you can bring in order to set the stage for getting this done as well as humanly possible. And I think it ultimately starts with your communications, and I always tell people I need to know your mission, your vision, and your values. And like, what does that have to do with my board? And I'm like, I promise everything, because what you're doing and how you're doing it and where you're going, and then the values that hold all of that together are this really, really important and essential part of building your board, because you need anybody that you bring on to be fully aligned with what you're doing and where we're going. We all need to be rowing in the same directions, and we all need to have those values in the same alignment. I think about one of the organizations that I work with, intersectional environmentalists, who one of their values is just joy. Because I know we get into a lot of climate doom, and everybody's like, the world is burning. But so one of their values is joy. And so they're not going to bring anybody onto the board who is all doom and gloom, right? Because that's just not going to align with what they're doing and how they're trying to do things. So those things are really, really important to get right and to be able to communicate before you even start to look for somebody to be on your board.
And I assume those values in this situation are driven by the founder. So the founder should write down, create values, mission, vision, have a starting point, and then build a board around that. Is that how you advise folks?
Absolutely. That is what I tell people all the time. Now, you don't have to have it perfect, and you don't necessarily have them solidified. That's something you can do together as a board.
Hmm.
But having some kind of jumping off point for people to get involved in is just incredibly important. They just need to know what the basic idea is here for them to kind of lead the charge on.
Oh, that clarity, so important. And how many initial board members do you recommend?
Well, I generally say like 3 to 5. You don't wanna get too many, but within that 3 to 5 people, I think there's just really some really good elements that you need to have. So one, and again, these can be mixed up in those 3 to 5 people, but one, you wanna have someone who understands nonprofits. That's just kind of a first thing off the bat. Just someone that has been in this space and understands them a little bit. And right next to that is some kind of like legal and compliance expertise. A lot of people go for lawyers. I've talked to a lot of lawyers who are like, don't bring lawyers onto your board. But 'cause they're like, they don't have the time to really dedicate to they're like, so if you get a lawyer, like get a retired one, someone who's got a little extra time in their day. But you want someone who understands that legalese and that compliance piece alongside of just understanding how that then relates to nonprofits as a whole. Then, of course, you want someone who understands fundraising a little bit. And then, of course, next to that, you need someone who understands finances and how to build budgets and read a spreadsheet. Like all of those things are really important. And then the last piece of it is just having someone that is plugged into the community and has some kind of lived experience in what you're doing. And a lot of times the founder's like, that's me. And I'm like, think outside of you. Get somebody else too. So like those are the five elements, whether however they are mixed up in your board that you should essentially have or try to have when you're starting that first board.
So smaller is better as an inaugural board because some people may think I need the 12 to 15 that we have, and you advise against that. Let me ask why. Why would you advise against that?
I would advise against it because when you are first starting out, it's that too many chefs in the kitchen kind of thing, right? You want to be able to build that foundation and build it solid before you bring on too many people. Like get that infrastructure really built and then we can start adding people in.
Very fair. And should the founding CEO, executive director, what should his or her expectations be of the board? How might they use the board to further the mission?
So this is a really good question because I always see people really struggle with whether their board should just be a governing board or whether it should be a working board. And when you get that first board, chances are they're going to be working just a little bit. It's almost inevitable just as you're really solidifying that foundation of your organization and really building your operations and building your systems and really figuring out what this ultimately is going to look like. They're going to have to put in a little extra work. And so as I'm like, what should they be looking for? That is going to be kind of a personal thing for every founder, depending on your organization, on what it is that you need. And while I was talking about like those skills and those expertise that people should have coming in, I think it's really, really important to do just a skills assessment of your own to figure out like what skills do I have and what skills is this organization ultimately going to need moving forward. Like if you have some kind of educational nonprofit, you're going to want an educator on your board. You may want somebody that has been part of like a school board or in some type of political expertise. And so what you're asking for those people to do is going to be really, really different than what you're expecting from maybe someone who's a little more plugged into the community. And so really defining the roles and responsibilities of each of these board members is going to be really important. And then I think the expectation should be for them just to understand that role and to understand their very specific responsibilities and their reason for being on your board, especially in that very, very beginning, because it's going to look just a little bit different when they're the first people.
I like your intentionality, and it's very strategic and intentional. And what about the board chair? Boy, it's such a critical role in any relationship in the nonprofit space. The
Mhm.
board chair and the executive director. Observations, and how do you coach your clients on that first board chair?
First of all, I just asked them to take a big old breath, like take a big breath, and then like let it all go, right? Because I need you to this needs to not be about you. We're gonna let it go a little bit. I know we founded this, we built this from the ground up, and it's our baby. But we're gonna have to let that go just a little bit because we have to let go of a little bit of control. And that is such a hard thing, and such a hard ask, and Imma hold your hand while I say this. But but it's really, really important to take yourself out of it just a little bit and to step back because ultimately what I really need them to do is to get really, really flexible with how they're managing things and recognizing that I'm gonna need you as the board chair to adapt to your board and how they work, because this is this group's first time coming together more than likely. These people may or may not have ever known each other, they've never worked together before. You may be their only real connection, and so you're gonna have to learn to adapt and to bend a little bit in order to build this really good, cohesive, effective board. And that's gonna take time too as well. Like, one thing I tell my clients all the time, like, my little motto with them is to build slow and build solid. Don't expect this to be perfect right off the bat. Don't expect it to be perfect, within this first 3 months. Like, it's gonna take a little bit of time, and that's okay, and give yourself grace and give the board grace as you guys learn and work and kind of really, really build this together.
Build slow and build solid. I like that wise advice. And so the first board chair, have you seen certain qualities or traits that have worked and maybe those that haven't worked in that first board chair?
I think that flexibility and having a really collaborative leadership and just a democratic management style tends to work the best. When you wanna kinda dictate how everything is gonna go and nobody feels comfortable disagreeing with you, everybody's just kind of there encouraging and supporting you, that's when things start to fall apart, and they fall apart really quickly, because then you as the founder or the chair are taking everything on yourself, and it's all falling on you, and if you're not able to delegate, if people aren't able to take roles, if people aren't able to take responsibility and autonomy for their areas of expertise, you're going to burn out. They're going to burn out. They're not going to feel comfortable, and they're not going to think they're really doing anything. And, you know, you're going to have a revolving door of board members, and that's not going to help your organization either.
No, we talked to several people that, the challenge is board engagement. And it sounds like if you start early in the process and intentionally engage the board and give some thought to it, get the right people around the table, you can impact board engagement for quite some time. So I
Yes.
like the way you frame that. And a first board, how frequently should they meet? Have you seen things that work? You'd say, oh, y'all have got to meet XYZ times, or how do you talk to your clients?
So this always depends on the organization and ultimately what they're doing. So, like, I had one organization that they probably met like twice a year, and their big thing was just a huge event that they had like in the summer. And I told them, this twice a year thing is okay, but you might want to meet a little more frequently as the event is getting a little closer, right? Two meetings is not going to cut it for like a one event kind of thing. I've had boards that met monthly, and I was like, you know what? This is a little much for y'all. Like, you're not saying anything new, nothing is really going on, and so we moved their board meetings back to quarterly, and everybody's like, "Ooh, I have all this time," and it's wonderful, and then things were much more productive in their meetings, and they were able to get much more done, and so ultimately, it just depends on your organization, and sometimes that's a little testing period. Really early on, I think it's good to start with monthly just to see, just to kind of get that going and get a rhythm going, get people engaged and make sure they're engaged. But after that initial build, maybe after that initial year, quarterly is probably fine as we move more into a governing situation.
And speaking of governing, so those initial board members, how long should they be on the board? Do you encourage term limits? If so, after how long? Because sometimes you see board members that they were there when it started, and
Forever.
it's 20 years later, right? So what have you seen work pretty well?
And again, this tends to be on a case by case basis, and I hate that, but it's tended to be how I work, that I tailor things to the organization, because a lot of people just want to stay on forever, right? A lot of people just want to feel connected to this thing that they started, and they just want to be there and have a say on how it's going. And that is great if we're able to move things forward, right? As long as we're not stuck in how things used to be 20 years ago, and we're able to continue to move and evolve the organization as it needs to be. But I've also worked with so many organizations where after 10 years, a lot of board members like, you know what? It's time for a group to come in. And I'm like, I love you. You're my people. And just recognizing when like new blood and new change is needed. And so I because of that, I do recommend some term limits. I do recommend no more than like 3 to 5 years at a time. Like, if you take a break for a year and come back, that's something different. But definitely you wanna keep those terms between, like, 3 and 5 years, just, again, depending on the needs of your organization as a whole.
And as the organization grows, is it always necessary to increase the number of board members? So we said start with 3 to 5, which makes sense. Now, take me out some period of time. What conditions should exist before you start adding the number of board members?
I would say that you have really good programs in place already. You have a good fundraising system in place already, and you already have just systems. You have a good system for bringing on board members and for training those board members, and you have a way to keep them engaged. And there is already some type of infrastructure there for them to come into. Um, I would say, like, you wanna have those foundational things in place first, and then as people or as the organization is growing, maybe you're wanting to add more programs, maybe you're wanting to expand a little bit, then we're gonna bring in more board members that are able to help us with that and have the expertise and the skills that we're gonna need for this next new phase of the organization.
Again, very strategic and intentional, different than sometimes you hear in the real world. But this is if you're able to do this, think through this being strategic on adding board members. Now, twice you've mentioned the F word, fundraising, and I'm curious. Okay, so board members are oh fundraising. All right, so
I
when
know.
you talk to boards, give it to me. What's the spiel and expectation on fundraising?
I tell them I do think everyone should participate in fundraising. Now, how that gets done can look very, very different. It doesn't mean I want everybody giving like $10,000, $20,000 a year or even raising $10,000, $20,000 a year, mostly because I'm very much about being community centered and being community led and community driven. And I also recognize that not everybody has those connections or that capability. But I do think it is really important for people to participate in some manner, in some way when it comes to fundraising, even if that is um, sending out an email or following up with the donors after a campaign. Like, everybody should be participating in some way. And if you can give like, $5 a month, that's even better. Like, if you can give a little something, that's even better, but you should be participating in that fundraising in some type of way.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that advice. And continuing on the theme of governance, or maybe back to the theme of governance. So, committee structure for an inaugural board. You only got 3 to 5 members. Do you need committees on the board?
I don't think you typically need committees right away. But certainly as you're growing, as the organization is growing, if your staff or your volunteers are asking for really specific type of support from the board, then I think it's really important to start forming those committees. I was on a board, and we were just talking about whether or not we were going to start different committees, and everybody was like, "We don't have time," right? But that board also meets monthly, so it's a very different thing to start. I think the other board I'm on, they meet quarterly, and we do have committees, and there was like 10 people on that board, and so it was kind of split up in that way. So it's going to really be based on your structure, how often you guys are meeting, and of course, the capacity of your board members. And so I would certainly wait until you start to grow and things get a little more solidified as far as your foundations and your operations. And again, I don't want to say it's just a larger organization thing, but it's more, I think, programmatic. Like, how big are your programs? How much how much support does your staff or your volunteers need from the board in order to get some of this done? Because remember, when we were bringing board members on, we're bringing them on with very specific expertise and skill sets. So when your staff and your volunteers are needing those skill sets, then that's when we're really gonna break these up more into committee areas.
And this is great advice because I would suspect some people think, that, okay, I'm going to start a nonprofit. I have to have a big board. I have to have committees because that's the way things are done. And you're really saying, no, it's got to reflect your stage of growth of the
Yeah.
organization and do what makes sense for you. And
Yeah,
it's okay. So whoever's listening gives you permission that it's okay. Sometimes textbook isn't always the best way. Sharman book is the
exactly.
is a better way to
Yes,
do it, right?
I
We,
like
we,
that.
we'll register that name. So last couple questions, and this has been so educational. So, what have you seen? Okay, if I am starting my first board of directors, because I've just founded a nonprofit, what have you seen that I should absolutely avoid? What mistakes have you seen? Like, oh, Corley, make sure you don't do this, this, this. Is there anything that you've seen across the industry?
Is this another one of those moments where I'm like, "Imma hold your hand when I say this?
Oh,
Don't bring on your family and friends."
there we you heard it.
Don't do it, y'all, don't do it. I and I think it's so easy, right? We have these people that support us and love us and wanna help us, but if they have no idea what, the spreadsheet says, they have no idea how to log your expenses, like, they're not gonna really help your organization move forward, and a lot of it's just gonna fall right back on the founder. So, and I have done it. I have brought on friends that weren't necessarily helpful, but then I've also really brought on friends that challenged me and um, weren't yes people, right? So I brought on some friends, but I also knew that they would not just let me get away with whatever. That even if they didn't fully understand the mission or the vision, they um, understood nonprofits in some way. And like I remember one really, really hurt my feelings because I wanted to go for this. I can't even remember how big. It was a huge grant, probably a couple $1,000,000. We had been working with a budget of, like, $5,000 at the time. And I was like, "Yeah, we can do this." And she was like, "Yeah, no, we are not. We are not going to do that." And, like, I still look back at that, and I still think we coulda done it. We totally coulda done it, but she also recognized that I was already burnt out, and I
Uh,
would have been handling, like, a good portion of this on my own. And she was just like, "No, I'm not gonna do this for," because she was, like, the grant writer, and she was like, "I'm not gonna do it. We're not doing this." And so I do really appreciate that at least I had brought someone who could tell me no, that we had created an environment where she was totally okay with disagreeing with me and saying no when no needed to be said, so
very, and kudos to you for listening to her. So, last question: there's somebody out there that's in the middle of starting their first 501(c)(3). What advice would you have to him or her? What guidance? What wise words from Sharman would you give?
I think we're going back to that build slow and build solid. It's okay. I think we get really excited and we see a need and we immediately want to solve it and just jump right in and do all the things. But it's okay to go slow. It's okay to get all the information that you need to really build this thing and to build it right. And now I'm not saying just to get all that information and like never actually build anything, but definitely build as you go, build as you're learning and do it as intentionally as you can.
Oh, Sharman, this has been great. So, how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn a little bit more?
Well, I am all over Viola Davis's internet. So you can find me on my website at blesseddesignsco.com. If you go to blesseddesignsco.com/friends, because we all friends now, I have some fun little goodies and giveaways for you as well. But I am also on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Blessed Designs Co. And if you want to hear me wax poetic about the nonprofit interest industry, I am on Threads as well at Just Charmon.
Sharmon Lebby with some great advice right there. She's the founder of Blessed Designs Consulting. She has walked in your shoes if you're about to start a nonprofit out there. So, Sharmon, I can't thank you enough for coming on and giving the tips on forming your first nonprofit board of directors.
This was fun. Thank you for having me.
All right, now it's time for the audience favorite part of this podcast. So that's recapping with Reed. Reed, we had a great conversation with Sharmon. What are your 3 takeaways?
That was a great conversation. My first takeaway is maybe her first point when you asked about the first board of directors. She said, don't worry about getting it perfect the first time. You won't get it perfect the first time. And I would argue that you're probably never going to get it perfect. So be flexible. But she did emphasize getting those first board members aligned with the vision, mission, and values, even if that's just the founder sketching it out real quick. But that is what you need to recruit around when you're forming that first board of directors.
I thought that was a key point. Very nice. Number 2.
She emphasized having a smaller board at the beginning. You know, many people might think I need 12 people because we need to share this message far and wide. But she said 3 to 5 board members at the beginning. You want someone who understands nonprofits ideally. I actually love how she broke it down, the archetypes that you want. Someone who understands nonprofits, legal and compliance expertise, fundraising expertise, finance expertise, and then somebody with lived experience or who's plugged into the community. So, and that can be over the course of 3 people, 5 people, you know, it doesn't have, or it could be in a couple people. So, but that I thought was really great how she broke that down.
I like how she articulated that as well. And number 3.
I love that towards the end, you asked her, what should you absolutely avoid? And she said, bringing on your friends and family to help you run the organization. I think that's great advice. It's easy to bring on friends and family because you know they're going to support you, but it might not be what you need. You know, she did give an example where she brought on a friend who was willing to tell her no and challenge her. And if you're able to bring people like that on, then we say yes. But, you know, don't bring on friends and family just because they're the ones that are willing to support you.
And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, 3 key points under Recapping with Reed in our interview with Sharmon Lebby. And we will I-501 see you next time.